Hello, I decided to make a short video explaining how the Treasury works since there's like so many people that still don't understand how it works to this day. So essentially, the Treasury can be considered as the team's national bank. So each team has their own treasury, and the treasury is essentially the amount of money the whole team has basically. So as you can see right here, our whole team has 335 coins. We're pretty poor. The treasury literally handles pretty much everything. When it comes to wages, that comes out of the treasury. When it comes to imports, if you import with the treasury, it comes out of the treasury. The treasury is the nation's bank, and everything comes out of the treasury. And for that reason, it is very important to keep a balanced treasury. Now, the thing about the treasury is that, again, since the wage replenishes the treasury, there's only four main methods that the treasury grows. Number one is through taxes, which is why I always recommend a set a tax rate of 10% at least. So let's see. Right now, it has 72 coins because it's been draining out because of wage, which is, by the way, I never recommend setting a wage because the wage is literally just the ripoff because so everyone would get like small little trinkets of wage, but like really, like for example, right now I'm a surgeon. I'd get 8 coins a minute. That's like see right here. That's like nothing. But look at that. It made a massive dent in the treasury, and for what? 8 coins. What am I gonna do with 8 coins? So like wage is always a scam. It always has been a scam. I always recommend never setting a wage because it just empties out the treasury, and there's no real purpose of setting a wage because especially on bigger teams, the bigger the team, the faster empties out the treasury, but everyone else still gets paid like pennies basically. Like if you have like a 40-person team, you're gonna be paying out what is that? A couple, even almost like a couple thousand coins a minute from the treasury, but like everyone individually gets like so minuscule diminishing returns from the payouts that it's really just not worth it because the amount of money you get from wage is insignificant to really alter your financial state at all, and the amount it hits like makes a dent in the treasury is so drastic that yeah, no, you do not want wage if you want a healthy treasury. See, 33 coins, it's not even enough to pay people. So what I will show you right now is there are multiple ways in which you can essentially increase the treasury. So there's tax, as I've explained. There's an item like a hunting rifle. See, it costs 248 coins. This is not actually its base price. It's 10% added to its base price. So I'll put the math up on screen what the original price would have been, and what 10% of that added would be. But essentially, when I buy this hunting rifle here, right? When I buy it, it costed me pretty expensive, but I added a bit of coins to the treasury from buying it. And this effect stacks throughout every purchase you make in a shop. There's the tax that the monarch sets. Every single purchase that is made from whenever there's a tax, every single purchase that is made in that kingdom just contributes that percentage added to the original cost. It contributes that to the treasury. So tax is pretty important to keeping treasury. But again, you'll get literally nothing if you keep having wage. So I'd recommend every monarch to immediately slash out all this wage here if you ever want to maintain a treasury because again, the wage does absolutely nothing. It doesn't make anyone richer. The amount it pays out is completely insignificant, and it just makes a big dent in the treasury because it has to pay out large amounts of money to large amounts of people. Individual people cannot really do anything with that money given to them. So you know, it's always been a scam. I've always been against wage, and I always recommend you slash wage as fast as you can. The only instance in which I would suggest using wage is if you're trying to get a lot of CA and you go down and you get universal basic income. But that's only case that's like in only very specific cases. I wouldn't recommend doing that in most matches. Now, how do you actually raise the treasury besides taxes? Because again, taxes do provide an increase to the treasury with usually the 10% because people get guaranteed liberties, which maxes out taxes at 10%, right? How do you increase the treasury? Well, there are three other ways. One is through donations here. You can be nice and just donate. That's what I'm gonna do. So there we go. We have 1,056 in the treasury. Then after, another way you can increase it is war bonds. Now war bonds, essentially the war bonds work. Whenever you buy a war bond, you get 4% of the monarch's share at the end of the game. So this can get a bit confusing. I've seen a lot of people misunderstand war bonds. But essentially, if I was to buy this war bond here, I'd get 4% of the Monarch's win share. Everyone has a win share. So at the end of the game, what happens is whatever's left in the treasury, let's say like right now it'd be like 1,100, would get partitioned between every team member, and each person has a specific win share, and that is based on their amount of time on team, if they're MVP in kills or not, and also I believe Surgeon, like having a lot of kills as a surgeon also does influence it, but I'm not 100% sure about that one. But essentially, everyone has a percentage of win share at the end. What's left of the treasury at the end of the match is just partitioned between everyone. The Monarch starts off with like a pretty high win share, like at 20-25% of the whole treasury. So let's say if the treasury was 100k by the end of the match, they would get like 25k, which is pretty interesting. But something that's more interesting is the war bond system. So the war bond system, the Monarch essentially gives up part of their revenue, their potential revenue, their win share, and it gives up 4% of that each bond you issue. So let's say, I don't know, they issue a bond for 10k, right? So that 100k treasury, assuming nothing happens to it, like no one, like you don't spend the money, you don't lose a capital, because by the way, you also, whenever you lose a capital, you do lose half of your team's treasury, so you don't lose a capital. But when you also take someone else's capital, you also get half of their treasury. But let's just say nothing like that happens. They have Dom, no one's contesting it, no one's taking a capital, they don't take a capital, right? So that 100k in the treasury would they would get 25k. But if they were to issue out war bonds for 10k each, which again never happens because that would be a scam. But if they were to issue war bonds for 10k each, they would sacrifice their personal win share. So their 25% win share would go down to something like, I don't know, 10%, depending on how many people buy. And in exchange, the treasury would be filled. So essentially, the way it works, it's basically just an investment. You're betting that the Monarch will win the match. So usually assuming you have a relatively big team, buying war bonds that are worth like 1k to 3k is a pretty good return. You usually get a return on investment. You get more money out of it than you put in. And you might be asking, well, why would the Monarch give up their own win share? Well, the reason is when they issue out sufficient bonds and enough people buy these bonds, so let's say, I don't know, 10 people buy the bonds, right? 10 people buy a 10k bond. Again, this would never happen regularly, because 10k is a scam. But essentially, they would essentially double the treasury to 200k instead of 100k. So they would get less of a percentage of the 200k, but they would still retain the original. They would still retain the 200k treasury, which means in net profit, even though they have a less win share percentage right here, they would still retain more money at the end of the match. So that's generally the way it works, is that the Monarchs will issue out bonds. By the way, you can issue at a maximum of like 20 bonds, so people can only buy 20 of these. The Monarch would issue out bonds. They can set the prices from 1k to 10k. But the Monarch would issue out bonds and essentially hope that in issuing out bonds, the treasury would increase to an extent in which they would overall make more money than they would lose. Essentially, they would sacrifice part of their win share in exchange for boosting treasury in general. So yeah, that's the way bonds work. They're a bit complicated, but generally I recommend setting a bonds if you're a Monarch, set it to like 1k to 3k. But generally, don't buy a bond unless you're sure of winning. So that means unless you have Dom and you know you're gonna hold Dom, don't buy the war bond, because you might just end up not getting anything if the team loses, and you're just gonna put money into a treasury that just might lose. So yeah. And again, any money you put in the treasury, whether it's from donation, taxes, or war bonds, you all lose a percentage of it. Like I think it's like 50% of the treasury whenever you lose a capital. So you don't want to do that. Now, something else to remember is at the end of a match, what happens to the treasury is that the game essentially counts the amount of players in a server and just adds a bit of money to the treasury. So if it's a big play, if it's like a 100-player server and you're on the winning team, if you have like a treasury of like 100k, you would get maybe like, I don't know, like a 20-30k bonus depending on the amount of people on that team. And yeah, it would just like overall just increase the amount of like money in this like bucket. The treasury is like the national bucket at the end of the match. So yeah, That's essentially how the treasury works. You always want to try to get this treasury number as high as possible and get as high as possible of a win share, because you want, essentially, if you want money, this is the best way. But again, you want competent monarchs who do not add wage. Wage is a scam. I hate wage. Do not add wage under any circumstance unless you're doing universal basic income. And yeah, don't lose your capital. You're gonna lose 50% of your treasury. Get other people's capital to get their treasury. And if you do this correctly and you issue out bonds correctly, you issue at the right prices and all that, you can make a lot of money. For example, one time I've hit a treasury of like 400K once, and as a monarch of that team, I also issued out bonds, and I basically gave incentives for people to boost the treasury. But anyways, at the end of the match, when I had finished the match, I had come out of the match with like 40, 50K, because the treasury was so big, and I was the monarch, and the server was pretty big. So because of all that, everyone came out with a bunch more money than they had put into the treasury. So yes, the treasury by far is the most efficient method to make money. I'd recommend it to anyone. But again, just be careful. Don't do any of the things I discussed. And yes, you should become extremely rich from this.